All right, welcome everyone to this Q&A. Again, I want to welcome everyone to this Q&A. Yeah, 1 second here. Yeah, 1 second here. All right, I want to welcome everyone again to this Q&A. Again, I want to welcome everyone. I want to welcome everyone to this Q&A. Yeah, something's come up. I mean, not a new thing, which I think I'll discuss a little bit, maybe a little bit different context. And that is that the great rabbis, the last generation, from Moshe Feinstein, of blessed memory, Torah giant of the last generation, in America, Aaron Kotler started the Lakewood Yeshiva, of blessed memory, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, of blessed memory, Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, of blessed memory, talking Torah giants of the last generation, unequivocally said, beyond the shadow of a doubt, Orthodox rabbis not allowed to sit with pastors, with Christians. Interfaith things, 100% forbidden. Right? Now, obviously, I'm a small fry compared to them. No question. These are Torah giants. I mean, you don't get much better than them. Torah giants, no question about it. They don't need me to, agree. They are, bona fide Torah giants. They said unequivocally, whatever the word is. They said clear as day. Clear as day. You're an Orthodox rabbi. You represent Torah. You're not allowed to sit, share ideas, have interfaith things. Now, someone would say that's very nice. Well, isn't that obvious? It should be obvious. Isn't it true we don't really have that much in common with them? I mean, they're quote unquote based on the Bible, based on the Old Testament, but they make the Old Testament a travesty and mockery of a sham. Right? So we have nothing in common. And what good's going to come out of it? We're going to try and draw them closer to us. No mitzvah. No mitzvah. Just the opposite. They're going to try and draw us closer to them. But now, I see something where, you get someone who's a pastor, even an evangelist, it's all excited that there are traditional rabbis giving him the time of day. Now, that's not exactly what he said. Right? But traditional rabbis, we're learning together. Now, first of all, we have to define what traditional is. But I'm not even going to go there. So the person's all excited to sit down with traditional rabbis and learn. But doesn't he have an agenda? What's his agenda? Of course he's got an agenda. His agenda is probably not just a sharing of ideas, because I can't imagine he could care less what Orthodox rabbis have to say. That I can't imagine. So why are they doing it? To show they're open-minded till their brains fall on the floor? I don't know. They have an agenda. They absolutely have an agenda. Right? Especially if they're evangelists and others. They want to convince us to be like them. Now, do I have a mitzvah and obligation to convince them to be like us? Nope. They want to come closer? That's their choice. Do I have a mitzvah to draw them closer? Absolutely not. There's no obligation, we mentioned many times, for a Jew to be out there with non-Jews, Noahites. I have to convince a Noahide to keep the Noahide laws that are universal? No. Other people may disagree, let them disagree. Right? Mentioned this many times. No mitzvah whatsoever. All right, someone will tell me, you're the light into nations. Okay, so where do you get from there? I have an obligation to reach out to non-Jews. To proselytize non-Jews to be Noahites. It's a little bit of a jump. Big jump. Got to put signs all over the place near every church, try and convince people. You know how many Jews there are? Don't know anything about Torah. Why would I waste my time with non-Jews? Especially if it's universal. Why would I do that? I mean, there are other issues as well. That's not really the point. Well, what's the point over here? The point is, again, we have a situation. We have a situation next week where you got a missionary going to speak in an Orthodox synagogue. I'm on Orthodox synagogue. So this missionary, pastor, whatever you want to call him, he's excited to learn with traditional rabbi. Why would we give them a place to speak? Why would we give them a soapbox? We don't know. We hold, let's say better. We hold their beliefs are nonsense. We hold it's idolatry. We hold we don't have anything in common with them. Someone will say, but it's got to be a motivational speaker. What do I care as a motivational speaker? You don't let someone like that in the synagogue. I don't care where he speaks. Speak in the rec hall. Speak in the cafeteria. I don't know. Speak where they eat. My language, I won't let him speak out of a bathroom. You got to say, come on, that's radical. That's not radical. You don't bring a person like that in. Period. I don't care what he speaks about. I don't care if he sits there teaching math. What do I care? Teaching geometry. Somebody like that, you don't bring into a synagogue as a motivational speaker. So again, same person doing the same thing. So a number of years ago, the speaker backed down. The rabbi himself, quote unquote, he didn't back down. He said it was desecration of God's name. Desecration of God's name, that Jews are upset that a missionary is going to come and speak in the synagogue. Why should Jews be upset? At the end of the day, somewhere points out, why does the topic have to be discussed? You're right, it really doesn't. I don't normally bring these things up. Right here and there. But the last generation, the Gedolim, the great rabbis of the last generation, in America made this clear. Made this clear. You don't sit with clergy. You have a different religion. That's not what you do. You don't do it, period. So I was thinking earlier, when this gets into a broader topic, which, I think needs to be discussed, not just, why is this person doing this again? Right? Why do you bring a sex therapist? Right? That's also a good question. Also a very good question. But see, it's a broader issue. You're going to say, what's the broader issue? The broader issue is really what motivates people to do what they do. You see, the Mesilas Yesharim, in his introduction to Path of the Just, the Ramchal in Mesilas Yesharim, Path of the Just, as it's known, in his introduction, he says, like anything else you want to acquire, science, math, you want to be proficient, you got to work hard. You have to work hard to acquire it. Fear of heaven is something that's hard to acquire. Very hard to acquire. So, the Ramchal there says in the introduction, we understand it's important. We understand good character traits are important to acquire. So if that's true, why don't we work hard enough to do it like we would acquire another knowledge? If you don't work at it, you're not going to acquire it. Secular knowledge, no difference. A person can take the book, walk around, put it on their head, and think they're going to acquire it by osmosis. No. You gotta work hard. To change any character trait, you gotta work hard. But see, most people would agree. Again, this is the Ramchal talking here. Most people would agree this is a good thing. Having good character traits is a good thing. They would also agree it's not an easy thing to acquire. And going away from bad things also not so easy. But he says you got to put in the effort. You have to work hard. No pain, no gain. But he asks a fundamental question, which I think ties into this. And that is, if we know it's so important, why don't we do it? Pretty easy question. Why don't we do it? Because I would think that anything that's really important is worthwhile to work hard to acquire. I mean, if it's something that's good. Listen, there are people, spend their lives maybe acquiring certain, expertise, certain knowledge, helps them make a living, this and that. But in the bigger scheme of things, is it something worthwhile? Probably it's not worthwhile. Tell me, you're helping people. This, okay, it depends what it is. Right? But in general, there are a lot of things, a lot of skills a person can have that's okay. Like, so what? Does that draw you closer to God or not? That's what we're looking for. Are we going closer to God or further away? So to acquire something that's good, that's worthwhile, takes time, takes effort. So this is one of the most important things of how we interact with others, how we stand in front of God, what we do. So how come people don't think about it? Not my question. It's the Ramchal's question in the introduction. The path of the just. But if you would ask most serious, people that learn Torah, and you would ask them, isn't this really so important? Everyone will agree. Not one person will disagree. Right? Then you ask them the second question. And the second question is, if it's so fundamentally important, so why is, they'll ask you, okay, so how much time do you spend a day learning these things? And working on different ways to fix up bad character traits. So even someone grows up in the system, in the Orthodox system, and the boys and the guys are learning yeshiva, they have a certain amount of time they learn it. It's called Musa, ethics. Or 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that. But also has to be learned. Not only learned, but you have to work on putting it in practice. The Ramchal in Path of the Just has a whole system. And he says if you follow the system, what's the end result? The end result is Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. Lowest form today of prophecy. Lowest form of prophecy today. So that being the case, if you follow the steps, and they're not easy to follow, people give up after the first couple of chapters. Controlling all my thoughts and this. It's hard. It's hard work. But a person can get to divine inspiration. I'm not saying you're going to sit there, think about things for hours on end. You got other things to learn also. But there are people who don't even ask the question. How come they don't ask the question? They'll tell you it's important. They'll tell you it's very important. Okay, very good. At least they'll admit that. So if it's so crucial and it's so important, why don't you study it? Why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you working hard towards it? It's catch-22. If you tell me it's important, then it's something I should focus on. If you tell me it's not important, I understand. Then I understand better. It's not so important, let's say. So if I don't have to work so hard, maybe I'll learn it, maybe I won't. It's not a priority. Don't we say derech eretz kidmul l'Torah? We say that a person's character traits even come before Torah. A person cannot learn. Let's say they didn't learn a lot of Torah, but they were an upstanding person when it came to midos, the character traits. It's also worth a lot. But if you don't have character traits, good character traits, when you learn, so what's your Torah worth? Rabbi of mine once told me he was learning under someone who was an absolute expert, genius. Babylonian Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud, early commentators, later commentaries, genius. But he said he didn't last that long learning by them. Why not? Because even though they were considered a genius in Torah, he said the character traits were horrific. Character traits in Torah go hand in hand. We don't compartmentalize. Does that mean we're perfect? Doesn't mean we're perfect. Right? But somebody could have a lot of Torah knowledge and at the same time be disgusted in God's eyes. So back to fear of heaven. I don't want to get sidetracked here. Back to fear of heaven. If a person has proper fear of heaven, right, not an easy thing to acquire. Person has proper fear of heaven, everything else sort of goes in a line here. Because you have a certain mentality, you have a certain mindset. So it's going to have a domino effect. It's going to have a positive domino effect. If the learning does not translate into making me a better person, into exemplifying what we learn, then what we learn is what we call mental gymnastics. You might get some level of credit for learning Torah, but as Moshe Schneider, my Rebbe's Rebbe, would say, a blessed memory, you don't want to be like a former student, an ultra-Orthodox student, which means that you're learning Torah like you're learning mathematics. That we can't have. That 100% we can't have. We don't compartmentalize. What you see on the outside is what you should see on the inside as well. Again, can people make mistakes? Yeah. Can people get caught up in all kinds of things and then go really off the rails? Yeah. They can believe they're doing it for the sake of heaven. But see, it really doesn't matter why a person does what they do. We're not in their situation. Right? God's the ultimate judge, not us. But they can be totally misled. But if the Torah that you learn gives you skewed results and goes far away from what the Torah wants, there's a problem with what they learned and how they learned. Because bottom line is, when it comes to these type of things, that we're going to have to answer for everything we do after 120 years. The question's going to be, did I really know what I was doing? Person well, I was under openness. What could I do? The evil inclination is very strong. That's true. That I won't disagree with. Even if that is the case. Even if a person has a lot of knowledge. There are red flags and there are guidelines. There are guidelines, what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do. There are things I would say, my opinion here, that may be a little more risque. And it could be even more, let's say better, controversial. But sometimes, you may have to go to the opposite extreme. You want to draw people in. Catchy title, catchy this. You may want to draw people in. Is that the best thing to do? No. Not the best thing to do. The Torah really 100% sells itself. But we're living, as I would say, in a friend of mine would say, marshmallow generation or a cream puff generation. So we're very weak. And the generation is very weak. So within Judaism, you want to try and bring someone back. I'm not saying you do things forbidden. They ain't not allowed to do, not even for trying to bring another Jew back. Not everything's permissible to do. Right? But again, there might be things that, certainly in previous generations, they wouldn't have done. Today, maybe it's a little bit different. I'm not saying it's the greatest thing, but sometimes you have to hit people where they are. Do certain things that, okay, we're not doing anything necessarily it's forbidden, but not necessarily what we normally would have done. Okay. Then there's a whole nother part. Then there's a whole nother thing. So we mentioned the beginning. All the great rabbis of the last generation in America all came out against sitting with non-Jewish clergy. Even Reformed conservative clergy. Again, Rav Moshe Feinstein, a blessed memory, of Aaron Kotler, a blessed memory, Rav Yoshev Soloveitchik, a blessed memory, of Yaakov Kamenetsky, the list goes on. All the Torah giants. Clear as day. So now, if they come out and say it's forbidden, first of all, there's no benefits. Anti-Semitism is not going to stop because of it. And they could have more influence on you than you'll have on them. So they said, it doesn't matter, it's all forbidden. It's all forbidden. And that's that. So now, bringing in people to speak, doesn't matter. You're not discussing theology. Person, the motivational speaker. What do I care what the person is or not? So the question is, okay, we've harped on this a few times. But let's see the broader picture. What's the broader picture? The broader picture is what's going on in a person's head to think this is okay. If you want to tell me a person's reform and conservative, I have no issues. I mean, not true. There will be issues, but you can't, what are you going to jump up and down and scream about? They don't know Torah's from God. They don't believe the Torah comes from God. They pick and choose and they do what they want. Okay, I don't have an issue with that. Right? They want to cut out a lot of the Torah. They don't believe this, that, okay. They don't claim to be holding anywhere in the world. Spiritual. Now, someone who claims to be Orthodox, that's a different story. Right? We're supposed to toe the line over here. We believe the Torah comes from heaven. There's reward and punishment. God is absolute. Right? You can't add or subtract to the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest of all prophets. There are principles. Right? 13 principles of the Rambam, of Maimonides. So, you go against any of those principles as a Jew, you lose your status of being a Jew unless you properly repent. That's how severe they are. So, every Jew has to uphold that. Right? It don't apply necessarily to non-Jews. Right? Every Jew has to uphold that. Okay. So now, what do you do? Oh, sorry, let's say better. So if that's true, and there are many things that are black and white. There are gray areas. I'm not going to say none. But see, when you open up a Pandora's box, everything goes to pot. Yeah, you want to be the most leftist in the Orthodox community and do certain things, the vast majority of the community is going to be upset. Right? You're breaking down barriers. Oh, sometimes you have to. Sometimes times call for that. I don't know when. Got to have big shoulders for such a thing. Right? But, in the end, just like the Noahide laws are universal and make sense according to our own logic, right? Or the logic of the Torah. That's why it's not my job to to go out and find Noahites, as we mentioned before, because they're universal. The laws are universal. They want to come to me and learn about it, different issue. For me to go to them, who says I got no obligation? They're universal. Now, within Torah, there are other things that are universal. Many things. I mean, not universal in the extent that God says you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, and what the criteria is. There are many, many things. The vast majority of things are black and white. There are gray areas. There are differences between rabbinic authorities. Fine. But there are boundaries. There are boundaries. So a person always has to ask themselves the question. They hear what a rabbi says. Now, if they have other knowledge, they're going to say, well, this sort of contradicts this, or this sort of doesn't make sense to that. I'll give an example, right? Rabbi of mine, when I was first learning, and I have a lot of gratitude, for what this person did for me, no question. But he's a heretic. He's a heretic. Eventually he said, okay, you want to leave the yeshiva, that's fine. Go somewhere where it's Zionistic, and you should make sure you do the army. I said, but I have enough money, I can sit and learn for years. For years. So basically what this rabbi was saying is that doing the army in Israel is more important than learning Torah. Now, some people would argue you need to stand in army. I agree. You need a standing army. Even at the time of King David, there was a standing army, but you had people sitting and learning. Right? So without going into that issue, because I've dealt with it before, the bottom line is, what does rabbi say? I hold learning Torah comes second to doing the army. In other words, they'll say, really, learning Torah is the most important thing. But you know what? Sometimes you have to close the Gemara, and this is what you have to do. There are times that's true. Hear the shofar. If you're learning, you close the Gemara. Right? To make a bride and groom happy. You can stop learning Torah. Bury somebody if no one else is there to bury them. You can stop learning. Doing the army, that's not one of them. Right? But if you're going to tell me, come on. If there was a Sanhedrin, the Sanhedrin says everyone has to go out to war, everybody goes. But it's a very big jump to say, first of all, you want to tell me there's a mitzvah to live in the land? That's the whole question is in and of itself. But if you want to tell me it's a mitzvah to live in the land, now you got to tell me it's a mitzvah to do the army. That's also a big stretch. Bigger stretch. But what this person is saying is doing the army comes first. If you want to sit and learn, that's great. Sit and learn, do the army, sit and learn, do the army until you finish your army service. So they're equating doing the army with learning Torah. Isn't Torah, I mentioned the Pirkei Avos, that's where it came up. My last class on Pirkei Avos, ethics of our father. There's nothing more important than learning Torah because The mission there says, Torah's life. Right? Let me get the exact quote here. The quote was, the more Torah, the more life. That means there's nothing more important. That's what we said. There's nothing more important than learning Torah. So how can someone say this is more important if you're not at war? Then I should be doing the army instead of learning. A big jump. So someone's now going to think. Someone's now going to think and say, does that statement make sense? Does that make any sense? Aren't we taught there's nothing more important than learning Torah? Yeah. He's saying otherwise. So now I have other knowledge. You can say, well, it's not so simple. It is pretty simple. In the outer Orthodox world, that's pretty clear. That's clear as day. Nothing more important than learning Torah. Now, the non-Orthodox community, they also say Torah is important. They're not going to deny Torah is important. But there are going to be other things that supersede that. In other words, they're going to agree, and we would also agree, that a person, has to support his family. Has to put bread on the table. You're right. So when a person's out there working, doing whatever they're doing, they have no choice. That's what they have to do. Whatever it is. Is that the ideal? No. But once a person's not working, they should be learning. Right? They're only working because they have to put food on the table. Right? It applies to a guy, not to a woman. Whatever the case is. Right? But what does the modern Orthodox community hold? Some of them, a good part of them. Not only, you have an obligation to put bread on the table. Not only is a mitzvah to do it, right? But something to thrive in. And that goes hand with other things. Watching movies, going to sporting events, different things. And I've spoken about that a lot also. So even without going there, there's a certain continuity. There's a certain continuity there. So, I'm not going to say across the board, every modern Orthodox person's like that, and every modern Orthodox rabbi has that. There are many that are very, very strong in their beliefs. They're not cream puffs. They're very strong in their beliefs. Very well learned. And there are others that take liberties. I guess that's what I'll call it. They take liberties and stretch things well beyond the way it should be. Again, a person, there'd be a whole question, let's say like this. You want to bring in a motivational speaker to a synagogue. What would be the first thing I would say? If a great rabbi is a great motivational speaker, bring him in or bring someone else in. You start with our own first. So let's say they're all booked. You can't find someone. So you go to a non-Jewish motivational speaker. Is that the end of the world? I wouldn't say it's necessarily the end of the world. Right? I don't think it's a good thing, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily the end of the world, as long as it's part. No religion. So you can say he's not going to bring your religion, even though it's a missionary. Okay, this is a little bit much. A little bit much. So the bigger question over here is what's going on over here? What's the mindset? We want to make sure people do things right. They don't stray to the left or the right, etc. Now, even if I had a guarantee, I had a guarantee what this person's going to talk about, all these other things. And he's a non-Jew. You want to let him speak? Let him speak. I wouldn't recommend it, but okay. Technically, nothing wrong with it. If he's got an agenda. You've seen what his agenda is. And he's so excited to learn, with traditional rabbis. He's not interested in learning traditional rabbis to get to the truth. He's not interested in truth. They're not interested in truth. So I understand his part. I understand, an Orthodox rabbi is giving him the time of day. He's giving him credibility. For him, there's a golden opportunity. Given unbelievable credibility. And if you tell me a church will let an Orthodox rabbi speak, give over whatever he wants to give over. Some might say it's also a good opportunity. Speak in such a way, let them think about what he said. Maybe he's going to convince people, whatever. It's also a golden opportunity. That's not going to happen, though. It's not going to happen the other way. Right? I haven't heard too many churches and mosques allowed Orthodox rabbis come and speak. Or any rabbis come and speak. Right? Now, I could be wrong. I'll be the first to admit, if that happens all the time, I'm sure it doesn't. And it wouldn't make sense. Why would they let them in? Why would they let them in? Oh, but you're going to let them into us? Oh, that's a different issue. They don't have a problem with that. Not at all. So, the mentality, is hard to understand here. If there are clear-cut guidelines, forget Reform and Conservative. I'll get them on Orthodoxy in a second. If there are clear-cut guidelines, and this would seem to be pretty clear-cut, so you say, well, maybe this lenient opinion says it's permissible. Let's use our heads for a second. Let's think. Is this something that God's going to be proud of or not? You gotta say, how do you know? Wait, you spoke to God lately? How do you know? I would think this is not a good thing. This is something God's not going to be happy about. In any way, shape, or form. Why in the world should we give something legitimacy that it doesn't have? Right? I wouldn't try and fit evolution into the 6 days of creation because it's false. It's a false premise. Some people may want to try and stick it in there, different things. We hold it's false. It's 100% false. If I understand something's 100% false, why would I let someone speak about it? You can say he's not going to speak about it. He's not going to speak about it. He's not going to be a motivational speaker. If it's a Jew, I can understand you want to have dialogue. Try and bring him back. A non-Jew, who says? If he's an idolater, I have to try and convince him. So I have to have a dialogue for what reason? No reason, no point. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. So this person will say, you know what? I asked my rabbi, who shall be nameless because he doesn't want to get killed. And he says it's okay. He's got broad shoulders. Very good. He's got broad shoulders. Right? How far do you want to stretch the limit here? And there are groups within modern Orthodoxy that are not Orthodox. Call themselves Orthodox, but they're not. Even that, I wouldn't have a problem with. That wouldn't even bother me. I would just say, don't call yourself Orthodox. You don't call yourself Orthodox, I don't have an issue. I don't have an issue. Because we don't believe in the same thing. But if you say you're Orthodox, there's certain things you got to believe. And there's certain things that are going to be permitted, certain things going to be forbidden. So you can say, well, Torah doesn't speak about this. You're right, Torah doesn't speak about it. Torah does say many times, stay away from idolatry. But he's not going to speak about idolatry. You stay away from idolaters. Right? We live in this world, it's a little bit hard. Right? Especially when we live outside of Israel. It's hard. They're all around. What? So I shouldn't speak to them? I can't be friends with non-Jews, so I spoke about this in one of my other classes. Right? That was the question. What? Can't be friends with non-Jews? You got to limit conversations. You don't want to have too many conversations because they don't think the same way we do. They don't have the same values we do. And the conversation can have a negative effect. You say, what? Come on, we're not that strong philosophically. You don't want to open yourself up. You don't even want to let any of these things in at all. There's a lot of heresy out there. So we have to be careful. So someone will say, well, you only live amongst people that think the way you do. That's right. That's why I live in an Orthodox community. Exactly right. People should think the way that that the Torah says they should. Some communities are stronger, some weaker. It doesn't matter. But you want to be around like-minded people. True. Like someone said, oh, so you live, how many, secular Jews live in your neighborhood? None, that I know of. I mean, there's some that have gone off, whatever, but, essentially, I don't hang out with secular Jews. Right? My question would be to a secular Jew, oh, so now you're going to paint me as a bigot. I only hang out with the people I think like. So how many Orthodox Jews you hang out with? So why don't you live, close to the Orthodox community? Oh, I would never do that. Because they're not open-minded. I have to be open-minded till my brains fall on the floor, but you're not open-minded. It goes both ways. Now, the question over here is that, is modern Orthodox an American thing? Or is it in other countries? First thing is, even in Israel, there's what we call, religious Zionists. There are people that are traditional. We'll call them dati. They're traditional. I want to, some more, some less. Mostly by Sephardic people. But the modern Orthodox crowd will be considered like the religious Zionists here. Now, there are many in the religious Zionist camp are very strong in their beliefs. Just they do the army and, think different things about the land of Israel. Okay. But some of them are very, very strong. In learning and this and that. They don't see movies. They don't go to sporting events. Other people, I would say no different than those in the States. Right? It's really much bigger, I think, in the States than most places. So, but the thing is, there are different gradations. Some can be, think and do, what I do, they just don't wear the same clothing. Right? And they may think the same thing about Jewish education, about work. There are a lot of gradations. Right? And someone points out, sounds like another version of Judaism. Right? Or Judaism lights. Right? Could be. But you see, they're not claiming to be another movement. It's the whole thing with what do you call it? With labels in general. Labels in general are a problem. But, in order to understand who people are and what they represent or whatever, we have labels, for better or for worse. Now, if you're outside the Orthodox camp and you belong to a different quote-unquote movement, okay. You have to remember, up until 250 years ago, just about everybody was Orthodox. Might not have been necessarily religious, right? But they were Orthodox. This is a new phenomenon. More than 100 years, right? Late 1800s, Reform movement. Early 1900s, conservative movement, right? So, it's only about 100 years old, a little more. So that I understand what they wanted to change and do. At least by the Reform movement, conservative didn't start out that way. It doesn't really matter. They're both only more or less the same. Conservative is 10 years behind, let's say. But they're catching up pretty quick. Even so, if you purport to be someone who believes God gave the Torah to Moshe, Moshe passed it down, right? Then you are what we'll call Orthodox, for lack of a better term. You keep Jewish law. You care for what you say. You hold by family purity laws, kashrus. Again, some more, some less. But the majority of things, I would say 98% or more, we agree. We would agree. Certain things we have different customs. Certain things, might be difference of opinion among rabbinic scholars. Okay, but the vast majority of things we agree in. So I would say, okay, the other 2% we don't agree on, fine. We don't agree on, but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. So some people want to make these borders much greater. Right? Sorry, the boundaries, let's say better. The boundaries, they want to open them up. Because certain things that really shouldn't be done, maybe not be 100% forbidden, but we don't do it. And for modesty reasons, other things. Problem is, you open up a Pandora's box, that's what happens. So even if technically, a woman tells me, about wanting to wear tzitzis. Now, tzitzis today may be considered a male garment. right? Technically speaking, it would seem that if a woman wore tzitzis that were pink in a woman type color, let's say, then maybe it's permissible. Maybe. Right? But the number of reasons why I hold it's forbidden, and that's not even the point. Right? So this woman comes to me and says, but I want to do this and whatever. I said, but don't you agree this, that, and the other thing? I said, even if I do, it's not done. We don't do it. So they kept coming back to me with this and with that. I said, but it's not done. We don't do it. It's not, doesn't matter whether I agree or not. Even if I did, so what? Right? So finally, I just dropped the atom bomb. Finally, I said, listen, you have two sons you want to marry off. They said, very true. Right? At that time, they weren't marriageable age. Right? But they were getting there. So I said, I'm going to tell you the bottom line. And I said, the bottom line is, if people find out that you wear tzitzis as a woman, doesn't matter all the proofs you bring in this and that. If anybody finds out that that is the case, they're not going to want to marry into your family. Doesn't matter how religious you are. Doesn't matter how religious your husband is. It's more than being dicey. Much more than being dicey. You're doing something that no one else does. It looks weird. You got to start somewhere. What, start this whole movement? No, we're not starting a whole movement of women wearing tzitzis. We're not doing that. You want to be Reformed conservative? Do what you want. In the Orthodox community, that's not going to happen. Not going to happen. So finally, I laid out the atom bomb. I said, people are going to think you're a quack. They're going to think you're an absolute wacko. And again, it doesn't matter how religious you are, how many hours you study, how great your husband is as a rabbi, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't matter. That's all irrelevant. Bottom line, the other side is going to check out your family. Going to check out obviously, the kid that they may want to marry, right? To their child. They're going to find out information from other people, what the family's like. And if that gets out, I guarantee you that's a deal killer right there. Right there. No one's going to marry into such a family. If they're ultra Orthodox. Because that's weird. You want to tell me you're Reform and conservative, that's a different issue. Then they're never going to check them out anyway. Right? They're going to want to marry into their family. Their child to marry into that family. But if someone does something well out of the realm of reality that nobody else does, nobody, and they're going to think you're more than modern over here, your kids won't get married. You'll be a pariah, an absolute pariah. That was my bottom line. And they kept coming back, well, got this proof and that. I said, it doesn't matter. And even if I would agree, it still doesn't matter. It's not done. It's not done. Period. I give you, number of reasons why we don't hold that way, but it doesn't matter. Because even if I think it's okay, even if I would say it's okay, technically speaking, which I wouldn't, but even if I would, it's not the norm. Why do you want to stick out? Why do you want to stick out more? There are certain things I'd love to do. One of them, when it's not raining, is wear sandals. I used to love these sandals, very, very thick, very comfortable to wear. In the outdoor Orthodox community, you don't wear sandals. Guys don't wear sandals. They wear shoes. I'm talking about sandals with socks. Right? They wear shoes. Different types of shoes. Doesn't matter. They're not open toe shoes. They're not sandals. It's something I miss. I'll tell you the truth. I miss it. I used to love wearing sandals. Very, very comfortable. Extremely comfortable. What am I going to do? My community doesn't wear it. Right? They're going to say, so what do you care? Because you want to fit in. You want to fit into the community you're going to live in. And if you don't fit into the community you're going to live in, you're going to have problems. And your kids are going to have problems who they're going to play with. If it's different types of communities, there's a lot of openness in different ways. There's a different issue. Even when I'm trying to do up north and I go up there and I say, okay, I'll wear my sandals up here. It looks weird. It would look weird. Now, synagogue up there, I pray in. A lot of different types of people there. people that are, I would say Zionists and whatever. Most people black hat wearing, not everybody. It's an interesting mixture. So I come in with my long black coat wearing sandals. That's going to look a little bit weird. But, okay, I wouldn't do it on Shabbos. Right? At least Shabbos I wouldn't do it. Right? During the week, why not? They're so comfortable. So comfortable. You know what? Your kids are going to go, they're going to be issues. There are going to be issues. So the greatest advice I got, one of my rabbis, when I came here, when I came to Israel, was do whatever it takes to fit in and have your kids fit in. Be mainstream. Don't do anything out of the ordinary, even if it's permissible. And if you do, hide it. You're going to say, what, I'm keeping my own individual? Again, you live in a community, you got to toe the line. If there are different standards in the community, different issue. Question is who you want to identify with. Now, if I want to be more Orthodox, I wouldn't be wearing a white shirt every day. I actually had pink shirts. Dark blue shirts. I had a yellow shirt at one time. You're not going to wear that in other Orthodox community. If you want to fit in, you won't. Right? If there are different standards in the community, okay. But it depends who you want to identify with. What type of community. I'm not saying the person got to change their dress overnight. Wear white and black, white and blue, white and gray. Right? White shirt, with or without pinstripes. But who are you going to relate to? What type of community? That a person has to think on, themselves. Who they want to relate to. In a modern Orthodox communities, we mentioned there are many gradations. There are some very strict, won't have a TV. There are some who will let their kids watch certain things only certain times. There are others that TV is not a problem. Going to a ball game is not a problem. Movies not a problem. There are different levels. We're going to say, but are movies forbidden? They are. For what reason? Either there's immorality, there's cursing, there's, all kinds of other things going on. Bad messages, not to mention a waste of time when a person could have been learning, at least for a guy. You tell me for a woman, maybe it's less of a problem. Okay. Does it make me a better Jew, closer to God or not? That's what we have to ask ourselves, anything we do. So now back to the, so someone asks, well, is it just an American thing? No, it's in other places also. Just call it different things. But, since I grew up in that culture, and I would say it's more predominantly there. There are things you look at, there's a group called Open Orthodoxy. You see some of the things they do and they say, they're not Orthodox at all. Not one thing. How can they call themselves Orthodox? It's a problem. So the question is, the real question is, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line, for certain things? And I would say very simply, you want to toe the line and do what other people do. You want to be modern Orthodox, you can dress however you want. There are modern Orthodox women, I'll throw this out there also, because I'm going to pick on them a little bit. Right? Some of them, married women, barely cover their hair. They wear a baseball cap and 3/4 of the hair is hanging out. That's forbidden. So someone asked me, how could they do it? I said, that's not you don't ask me that question. Go ask them why they do it. Isn't it true? A little bit of hair came out. Okay. Right? A hand's breadth, right? A fist. If that amount of hair came out, one thing, you still have to cover it up. Right? We're not going to whip you with a wet noodle if it happened, but you got to cover it up straight away. Who says I can leave 3/4 of the hair uncovered? Where do they get that from? I have no idea. They're going to say, well, at least they're covering their hair. That's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is you're going to cover it. Now, someone say, what about a wig? Wigs, more beautiful than human hair in many ways. So if you're Sephardic, they don't wear wigs. Some Ashkenazim also. Women wear scarves, berets, whatever, but they won't wear a wig for that reason. But there are modest wigs. We're not talking about a wig that goes all the way down your back. Right? Shoulder length, no more. Right? It's permissible as long as it's not ostentatious. But again, if you're Sephardic, you won't do it. But okay. So then what is the permissibility to cover your hair 1/4 of the way? That makes no sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. So why do women do it? Why do people do all kinds of things? Why do people smoke? Why do people gamble? Why do people do things that are bad for them? I can't answer that. You have to answer them. It's addictive. It's this, whatever. Many things. I don't know my answer to those questions. But I would say, if you're going to do the mitzvah, you do it right. If you're not going to do it, I would say don't bother. Because if you're going to do it halfway, nothing good is going to come out of it. That's my fanatical side. Nothing good will come out of it. So you're going to say, make a Passover Seder. Big deal. You read the book. You read the Haggadah. Rub it up, dog. Let's eat. You finish the Haggadah in 20 minutes. You don't discuss anything. Drink the wine or grape juice. Eat a little bit of matzah. And that's it. You're done by 7 o'clock. That's called Passover. Or nothing. And a lot of people, when they do the Seder, they don't do it at sundown. They do it before because it's late. Because they change the clocks. They could drink 4 cups of wine, eat all the matzah, do everything right, and it was the wrong day. It wasn't the right day. You didn't do it after sundown, half an hour after sundown. They did it the wrong day. A lot of people are going to get shocked. They'll get upstairs. They say, well, at least I kept the Passover Seder. God says, really? Allah is you have to do it at sundown. You finished at 7. Wasn't even sundown. Still light out. Wasn't even Passover. Okay, I'm making fun of it a little bit, but it's kind of silly. If you do it right. You don't do it, don't bother. Right? That's what I would say. If you're a Reform or conservative Jew, it's a totally different issue. They do what they want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's right. It's wrong. Someone goes to synagogue, say Kaddish for their mother, say the morning's prayer for their mother. Right? And you go according to the Hebrew date. Right? You go according to the Hebrew date. So in that synagogue, what time do they pray the evening service? 7 o'clock at night. All year round. Okay. Right? So now it's summertime. When is sundown? Probably about 8 o'clock, 8:15, 8:30. So you're supposed to say Kaddish at night. And then the next day. So the next day they might get credit for it. But if they say it the night, it's not nighttime. It's the wrong day. Right? So that soul thinks, oh, I'm getting all this help because they're saying Kaddish for me. It's the wrong day. The wrong day. You can say, well, it's a thought that counts. We don't hold it's a thought that counts. We hold, did you do it right or you didn't do it right? There could be different levels, different things, intention, okay. But if you didn't do it right, you didn't do it right. And if a woman covers a quarter of her hair, well, at least I covered some of it. In a Reform and a conservative school, it's probably in a conservative synagogue. Woman walks in the synagogue, they have a doily. Anyone know what a doily is? One of these satin things you put on your head. See-through. So they're going to wear something. It's called the doily. I don't know why they call it that. That's what it is. Right? They put it on their head. Very good. Doesn't cover their hair. So what's the point? Or you go to a synagogue that has a mechitza, separation between men and women. And let's say it's a minimal size. It's kosher. Okay. But let's say the mechitza is made out of plexiglass. Like you're at a hockey rink. Right? And you can see, the women can see you, you can see them. So what's the point of doing that? Rabbi, come on, it's a separation. Separation between men and women. I was in a synagogue like this once for something else. Right? And I felt like I was in a hockey game. I wanted to check someone on the board. But it was clear you could see in and out. It wasn't like they couldn't see out, you couldn't see in. If you have that, okay, that's a different issue. You can't see. But if you can see straight in, what's the point? Foolish. I don't care if it's a minimal level. Even if it's higher, so what? It defeats the purpose. Right? It defeats the purpose. I'm not saying every synagogue is like that. I'm not going to overgeneralize. People hammer me for that also. I'm telling you cases that have happened. So you're going to say, but isn't that doing that better than nothing? The whole point is your hair, a woman's married, if she's married, her hair has to be covered. The point is, if you have a mechitza synagogue, men shouldn't be looking at women, women should be looking at men. You should not be able to see through. That's why normally they're upstairs, or there's a wall up, or there's a wooden mechitza up. You can't see through. That's the whole point. So now, someone's going to say, Rabbi, come on. But if people do that, why do they do that? Why do they cover a quarter of their hair? I'm not going to answer that. Why they do that? You want to know what I think? Because I think they're stupid. That's why. And they're lazy. They don't want to do it right. They just want to do what they want to do. That's not Torah anymore. So over here, fine. You want to do something controversial, bring people in. I get it. Within reason. Not everyone would agree. That's okay. Right? Sometimes you may have to do drastic things to bring people in. People think, come on, you send out these emails, different things, catchy things. Yeah, because I want people to open them. I want people to read it. I want people to watch it. So yeah, I'll make it a little more flashy, maybe a little more controversial, this, that. Okay. People say, why don't you just put up the sign like this? I could, make it generic and whatever. But I want more people to see it. I want more people to open it. Right? So not everyone would agree with that. Okay. Technically, did I do anything wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not doing anything forbidden. I'm not saying the tomatoes and orange. I'm not doing that. Comparing different things that have nothing to do with each other. There is a certain level of leeway. People, may put up, signs, flashy things, different things, to draw people. That's not forbidden. People may not like it, it's not forbidden. But if you're going to do something that goes against the grain of everything that Torah stands for, right? So you're going to ask, so why would he do it? And it's very simple. First time around, didn't think there was anything wrong with it. Supposedly had a rabbi behind him saying it was okay. And he didn't want to be named. Of course he didn't want to be named. Second time around, also doesn't think it's a problem. I'm going to convince him why it's a problem. He's going to tell me he's a motivational speaker. He's not going to speak about Christianity. He's not going to missionize. This guy is jumping up and down for joy. Right? This missionary. Because he said, traditional rabbis. We're having dialogue with traditional rabbis. He knows who the real deal is. He knows the Reform rabbis, Reconstructionists, whatever you want to call them. They're all a bunch of Mickey Mouse rabbis. They all don't know much about their own religion. Right? So what does he care about them? That's not such a big thing. Not such a big thing at all. He's got Orthodox rabbis to talk to. Oh, that's a whole thing. That's much more important. That's much more worthwhile. Whether he's going to convince them or not, there's dialogue. There's dialogue with people keeping the Torah. They think according to the way God wants. These other people are a joke. We understand why it's a joke. Right? Now he takes out his claws. Now he's, oh, this is exciting. But what's the worst part? I'll tell you what the worst part is. The worst part is you're giving something legitimacy that has no legitimacy. Has no legitimacy. Someone told me, that, if we're not going to deal with Noahites properly, let them be Muslim lights. Because they're very similar to the Noahide laws, which I don't think is true. They might be monotheistic in many ways, but okay, that's a whole nother discussion. But the bottom line is, my answer was, we don't believe it's true. We don't believe they're true. And there are problems in the narrative. Contradictions. Right? Serious contradictions. So if I know the book isn't true, then why would I send someone there? Why in the world would I do that? It's not true. Right? Why would I sit with somebody and give them give them their soapbox, so to speak? I'm giving them legitimacy. They'll say, come on. They're also going to give you a certain level of honor. Right? They'll also give you legitimacy. I'm not interested in their legitimacy. We don't care what they think about us. We killed their savior. Yeah, that's true. That's what the Talmud says. In the uncensored Talmud. Yeah, it's true. Why am I having a dialogue with it? Going to bring peace to the world? No. If you know anything about history, how many Jews have died JC's name, I'm going to have a dialogue. Everything they've done, lied, all these things. But Rabbi, come on. It's not the end of the world. He's not going to missionize. He's going to be a motivational speaker. So what? You don't let him in. Why would the person do it? So now I have to get in their head. Why would this person do it? He can do it for any number of reasons. The main reason, I think, is because he doesn't think there's anything wrong with it. Forget about drawing people that could be part of it. How far, want to be so open-minded with the outer community. We want to be with everybody and all that. I could hear that. I can definitely hear that. Who says that's right? Who says that's the right way to go? But he doesn't think there's anything wrong. Not only that, he says that, he goes much further. He'll say if we're against it, that's a desecration of God's name. How can that be a desecration of God? You're sticking up for Torah. You're not giving this guy a soapbox. I don't care what he's speaking about. You don't give him a soapbox. So he doesn't think there's anything wrong with it. Now, according to his outlook, how can he think there's nothing wrong with it? Right? So if I would quote Rabbi Mizrahi, he would say, you know what? He went to university. University messed him up. So, books that he read messed him up. Movies that he watched probably messed him up. Could be 100 reasons why. But the orthodoxy of this person is skewed. It's cracked. Totally correct. There were psychopaths, in the world. They also thought they were doing the right thing. And they also had a whole scheme of why. When you look at what they said, what they said didn't make any sense. And we see that they were, psychopaths, murderers, a lot of them. So now, I'm not going to say this guy's a psychopath. I'm not saying that. But what does that have to do with Torah over here? There aren't any other Jewish motivational speakers. In other words, his Jewish philosophy, the way he looks at the world according to the Torah, is cracked. It's cracked. You look at Elisha ben Abuya. Elisha ben Abuya was a Tana. Sat on the Sanhedrin. He was known as Acher, the other one. Right? What led him to go off? All the books that he read. According to many opinions. Read a lot of things he shouldn't have read. Secular things. Then he started questioning things. Then he saw something and then he said, okay, that's enough. I've had enough. And he left Judaism. Became a heretic. Person thinks I can read anything I want. I can see anything I want. It has no effect. It's not true. The soul, just like we're recording, records everything. And these things become part of your psyche. Now, if a person watches things and there's a lot of cursing, a lot of vulgarity, don't you think a person may curse or whatever? At some point you think, no, I'm not going to do that. It has an effect. A lot of these things have an effect. But a person could cloud things, and think, and say, okay, I'm going to take out the bad, I'm going to only use the good. Right? That was the question of Rabbi Meir. Right? One of Elisha ben Abuya's main disciples was Rabbi Meir. And they asked Rabbi Meir after Elisha ben Abuya was a heretic, they said, how could you learn from him? He's a heretic, you can't learn from him. So what did he say? He said, I'm gonna take what's good and the other stuff I'm gonna spit out. The heresy I'm gonna spit out, like, if I was eating something in the shell, I'll eat the thing in the shell that's good, and the other in the shell itself I'll throw away. The shell itself I won't use. Right? But this leads to other issues. Right? And one main thing is, if somebody does this, it doesn't think there's anything wrong with bringing such a speaker, not to mention a sex therapist, right, as well, that was done a number of years ago. If they don't think there's anything wrong with that, what does that say about their Torah? Can I listen to anything they say in Torah? Person could be big in Jewish education, could be big in all kinds of things. I wouldn't trust anything this person says. Nothing. You're going to say, well, can't you just take the good and throw out the bad? No, it's all bad. It's rotten to the core. Because that leads other people astray thinking this is okay. And other, wacko philosophies within Orthodox is also okay. It's like taking a minor opinion. All the rabbis say, not allowed to do it. One Torah giant says you're okay, you're allowed to do it. I'm going to hold according to that. But what about the book of Exodus, chapter 23, verse 2? Go after the majority for good. How can I hold according to minority opinion here? I mean, it's a whole discussion of itself. Probably not a good example, right? But something like that, you got to be careful. Because if there are things that are done that certainly aren't good, you throw the whole thing out. I just heard Reb Berkowitz, Shlita should be well. From Eshet Torah, the head of Eshet Torah, spoke about this whole case I spoke about on controversial issues. Chaim Walder, wrote all these books, or Walder, I think his name is. Whatever, wrote all these books, he said you get rid of the books. This guy is a psychopath, narcissist, psychopath. Did all these terrible things. You get rid of his books. Everything's bad. Because, we're not getting into his head. Why did this? Why did that? That's, as he said, that's for the base in Shomam. That's for the upper, that's for the heavenly court. It's not for us to judge. If we would have been in a similar situation, whatever. But that's not even the point. That's exactly what he said. That's not even the point. It doesn't matter what his psyche was. And why he did what he did. That doesn't matter. He did what he did. So you can't read anything he wrote. Because the person, on the inside is totally corrupt. Doesn't matter if what they wrote wasn't corrupt. Right? You throw the whole thing out. Because the person himself is corrupt. From what he did. So in this case, in our case, that ain't different. You're going to bring this guy, this missionary, the motivational speaker. He's all corrupt. All within is corrupt. Can't listen to anything he says. If he tells me right now in Jerusalem it's 6:18 p.m., which it is, I'm going to look once, twice, three times. I'm going to check all over the place if that's the case or not. I'm not going to trust one thing this person says. Because this is egregious. This is something, there's no excuse over here. He thinks there's no problem. Why not? Ego. Well, it has to do with ego. I'm going to do something that people, wouldn't do. Heard a rabbi learned under, came to prenuptial agreements. Person gets married, that, sign a prenuptial agreement that God forbid they get divorced. They're going to go to ex rabbinical court and the husband's going to give a bill of divorce. Right? And this person has the gall to say, I can do something the Vilna Gaon 250 years ago was afraid to do. You're comparing yourself, this person is an ant. We're all ants compared to the Vilna Gaon. My Rebbe's an ant compared to the Vilna Gaon. Brisker Rav, a blessed memory, was an ant compared to the Vilna Gaon. So you want to say you're doing something the Vilna Gaon was afraid to do? I wouldn't trust anything this person says. That's ego at the highest degree. Person also said, Rav Shach has his opinion, I have my opinion. Rav Shach was the Gadol Ador, last generation. Greatest rabbi of the last generation. That's ego. Ego has no place in Torah. None. When somebody says something like that, I wouldn't trust anything they say in Torah. Not to mention things that they say were totally forbidden. Right? So things that are said are egregious, and in open orthodoxies, some people have said, the occasion, the binding of Isaac, God and Abraham failed. Heresy. Goes against the Ramban, goes against others. Moshe Rabbeinu are not the best of leaders. These are problematic things. Extremely problematic things. They make the person a heretic and you should never listen to anything they say. Nothing. So somebody does something like this and say, well, it's not so egregious. It's not going to be a motivational speaker. Think about it. Think about it. A lot of it has to do with ego. How far can we make the boundaries bigger, open, be so close the other day? Look, we're even going to bring someone like this. And I saw someone else I went to yeshiva with many years ago. Brought in Oslo, whatever, brought in a pastor, speak about who knows what. Solidarity. Another synagogue I know of, they had a Baptist group come in and sing. Well, for goodness sakes, isn't there a limit? You can't, Kaufman's law, you cannot turn the Torah into a pretzel. Can't do it. It's forbidden. You don't open up a Pandora's box. And even if you're telling me, technically speaking, maybe there's nothing wrong with it. What does it represent? What does it represent over here? All right. That's why people have to come out so strong against it. But you have to see the bigger picture. Right? And the bigger picture is they don't think that, people like this don't think there's anything wrong with it. That's the problem. They don't think there's anything wrong with it. But that opens up other doors you don't want to open. Even if technically I would say there were no issues. You know what they say, if it's not broken, you don't fix it. Because we see other quote unquote movements have tried to, do innovations, other things, but a disaster, an absolute disaster. Right? So I'm not getting into anyone's head why they want to do this. I can think of a number of reasons why. Potential. It doesn't really matter. Right? It doesn't really matter. The question is, how do we look at it from a Torah perspective? And that is, you don't open up a Pandora's box. Again, even if you had a rabbinic a rabbi worth their weight, and they say, yeah, you can do it, it's okay. Whatever, you got to have very broad shoulders, certainly for certain things. But in this case, his other rabbi won't come public. Of course he won't come public. They'll kill him. Not literally, they'll crucify him. They'll murder him in the press. Come out and say he's a heretic for giving such a psak, giving such rabbinic license, blah, blah, blah. And there are people been out there saying all kinds of crazy things. Their certificates of being a rabbi was revoked because they're heretics. Heretics. Got to be proven. Got to show that. Right? So that's what, I would say on that. I do feel bad sometimes, I do bring this up, but, people have to know. Certainly not going to be afraid to speak the truth. And people don't like it. Okay, it's too bad. But you can't just let things go on. And, no one says anything. Because if we don't say anything, then we're just as guilty. Even if nothing's going to change, we're just as guilty. But again, somebody like that, you don't listen to a word they say. Not one word. It just leads to other things. Yeah. Any questions? Any questions? Or other questions? All right, I'm going to stop there. Anyone has any questions? I do this every Tuesday, Thursday. You can find me at Michael Chaim Kaufman on Facebook. You can find me at Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. You can send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com. FFMAN@gmail.com. Wishing everyone a good end of the day, depending on what you want. And